Why is the truth important? We live in a culture that casual dishonesty we live in a culture where casual dishonesty is just that. It's casual. Um, Truth doesn't seem to have importance, and the representation of reality is negotiable more and more. But truth is rather important. In fact, I would wager that truth is of paramount importance. And by truth, I mean, well, how would you say what truth means? By that statement, I mean honesty. We are obligated under faith um, to act as moral leaders when it comes to our faith, when it comes to having the ability to lead with our deeds and our actions rather than to merely follow what our maybe our inner senses tell us or what other people do to reflect that, to bounce off of that, the actions of others. We are obligated in our faith instead to lead and to act according to something greater than ourselves, a standard that is greater. That also is less and less popular. This notion of a standard. But honesty, the representation of reality, is of paramount importance spiritually. Truth is a very precious commodity, and more it becomes more and more precious as the world fills with lies and misinformation. The representation by ourselves of truth becomes increasingly important. Today I wanted to share a bit of uh, history. Behind me is written a word. It's a or is that how you say it? Transliteration of an ancient Egyptian term that I really like and I've grown to like. Ma'at is how you pronounce it, I think. And this ancient Egyptian word is in reference to the beliefs of the ancient Egyptians that at the end of the day, Ma'at represented the ultimate truth of God, the ultimate truth. And as an example of that, when someone passed to the next life, their spirit, themselves would come before a scale, and Anubis, the god in ancient Egyptian mythology, would be standing there, and the person would approach this scale, the scale of Ma'at, the scale of truth, in other words. Their heart would be placed on one side, the person's most inner reality. And on the opposite side of the scale would be the feather of Ma'at, a representation of the truth. And the scale would be weighed. And Anubis would determine if the person's heart was heavier than the feather, then the person would be devoured by a hellish monster. But if it's equal to Ma'at, they could ascend to the next level, the heaven equivalent. I also have a little statuette that represents Ma'at as a person, and she was always represented as a female goddess of truth. I take her very seriously as a principle, and it's I wanted to explore why it is that truth and honesty is important, not just that it is. To be truthful, to be honest, it means to best represent the reality of things to our ability to live according to our awareness, to syncretize, to keep in sync our level of awareness with the consistency of our actions, and to make those things align, because as moral beings, as beings of consciousness, we don't have the shield of ignorance. You could almost say, well, we do, to an extent. But for example, in the animal kingdom, in the natural world order, animals, for example, are innately ignorant, by and large, innocent. Beings of higher consciousness, even though our consciousness could ever go higher. Beings of higher consciousness, such as humans, do not share the same invincibility. And when our consciousness expands beyond the limits of ourselves after we die, it would be wise to have that consciousness, that awareness, and to have preserved it with an honest life. Because if there's a discord between those two, in the end, everything is corrected. Everything is brought to the higher order of Ma'at, of truth, of the true state of things. In light of that, honesty becomes paramount. Now, dishonesty doesn't just mean telling lies. And that, I think, ought to be understood. To be dishonest means that you fail to represent your own awareness in whatever capacity, be it speech or action or inaction, more often than not, a lie is a partial truth. Very seldom, I think, do lies, are they souped up, wholly fabricated. But they have a partial of truth. Because that truth is what sells it. Basically, the object of our faith ought to be to represent reality. If forgiveness means to morally lead by being a light instead of a mirror, instead of just reacting, the one thing we ought to be a mirror of is a mirror to God. In other words, a reflection of our awareness of God. And by extension, an awareness of everything, because ultimately everything's God. The truth saves, because it's all there is. It's all there ever was. As like with the scales with Anubis. We live in this world of shadowy illusions, fake information, misrepresentation, and lies can and do have very real consequences. So to be honest with ourselves, because sin is ultimately a lie to yourself, and denial that there's no consequence to this, that this will not be reckoned on the scale, when it will. Everything is corrected anyway. It is a duty of faith to preempt that correction by living as correctly as we are aware. Then we're blameless. We regain the innocence that was lost by knowledge, by our ability, by our consciousness. Because we're conscious, we have responsibility. But we regain that innocence and that blamelessness and invincibility when we are honest and we honor Ma'at, the truth. We regain what was lost. And God willing, gain it all